If you were to type the words, "Who am I?" in small letters without spaces into some computer programs, the computer would tell you who it is. It would tell you who created it. It would tell you about its capacity. It would tell you about what it can do. In other words, if you ask a computer, "Who are you?" it'll answer the question. Now, if you asked yourself that question, what would you say? If you asked yourself, "Who am I?" how would you answer it? Do you know who created you and what you were created to be and to do? Dr. Rondell Bain is an Episcopal priest who has written a lot of books on spiritual topics. Several years ago, his son wanted to study to become a circus clown. So his son went to Europe to study with the best clown trainer in the world. Ron went over to see his son and had visited one of the clown training sessions. He was taken into a big room with a door in the center of it, a frame and a doorway. And each clown in training would walk around behind the door, come through the door, and then do their routine. The clown trainer would tell the other clowns in training how they should respond. Sometimes they would boo and hiss no matter how good the routine was. And sometimes they would clap and cheer no matter how bad the routine was. And sometimes they would give the silent treatment. The clown trainer kept saying to the clowns in training, "You have to know who you are before you come through the door if you're going to succeed as a circus clown. You can't wait until you get out there and let the congregation or the crowd tell you who you are. You have to know who you are first." I think the same thing is true with all of us. We have to know who we are before we come through the door of life. We have to know who we were created to be, or else the crowd will always tell us who we are. And sometimes they will boo and cheer, boo and hiss no matter how bad we are. And sometimes they'll cheer no matter how good we are. The point is that you have to know who you are before you walk through the door. Jesus was someone who knew who he was. In the Gospel of John, over and over, Jesus tells us who he is before he does what he does. 6 different times. He has these "I am" statements. For example, after he fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish, Jesus said, "I am the bread of life." He not only provides bread, he is bread. Before he healed a man born blind, he said, "I am the light of the world." He not only healed a blind man, bringing light to his eyes, he brings light to the world. And he also says, "I am the good shepherd." To those who were hurting and outcast, he is a good shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep. You see, Jesus knew who he was before he did what he did. He found his identity in God, and that gave him the strength and the power to do what he was called to do. But oftentimes, we don't know who we are. We don't have a clear sense of who we are created to be, and therefore we don't know what we're supposed to do. Several years ago, Julia Roberts made a popular film entitled Pretty Woman. In the film, she plays the part of a high-class hooker. And 3 times in that movie, her clients ask her this question: "Who are you anyway?" And every time, Julia Roberts gives the same answer: "Who do you want me to be?" That character doesn't know who she is. She'll be whatever they want her to be. The tragedy is the same thing is true with many of us. We will be whatever the crowd wants us to be. We don't have a clear sense of who we are and who we were created to be. Lily Tomlin, the comedian, once put it this way. She said, "I always wanted to be somebody. Maybe I should have been a bit more specific." The truth is that God is specific. God created each one of us as a unique, unrepeatable person. And our challenge in life is to get to know who that person is and what we're called to be and do in our lives. That's the goal of our life, to know who we are and what it's about. One of the most important things to know in life is who God created us to be. Wayne Muller, in his recent book, How Then Shall We Live?, says there are 4 questions that face every person in life. The first question is, who am I? The second question is, what do I love? Third question is, how then shall I live? The fourth question is, what is my gift to the world? But the first and most important question always is, who am I? It's a question each one of us need to wrestle with. Shakespeare put it this way in his play Hamlet, when he says, "This above all, to thine own self be true, and it follows as night the day, that you cannot then be false to any other person." This above all, more important than anything else, know who you are and be true to that. I once attended a workshop on identity. It was a workshop where we were gathered in small groups, and people kept asking me who I am. And so I kept giving answers. I'm a pastor. I'm a father. I'm a Christian leader. They kept saying, deeper than that, deeper than that. And finally, I just burst out saying, I am a passionate, compassionate, visionary, loving Christian leader. I thought, where did that come from? I had a sense it came from God as a way to articulate for myself who I am. So every morning when I get up, I look in the mirror and I remind myself who I am to be that day. A passionate, compassionate, visionary, loving Christian leader. No matter what happens, to try to be that. To ask myself, how would a compassionate leader handle this problem? How would a visionary leader deal with this issue? You see, all of us need to go deep inside and say, who has God called me to be? And then live that out in the world. A young mother once demonstrated for me how to know who you are in a crisis. Several years ago, I was called to a hospital. A young baby had been born prematurely. The baby had lived for 17 days, had been in an intensive care unit, and was struggling for life. The baby had gotten an infection and was on life support systems. There was concern that the baby would not live. I was called by the parents and asked if I would come to the hospital because they had been told they needed to take the baby off of these life support systems. I went to the hospital, met with the family and their parents in a waiting room. We prayed, we cried, and then finally, the young mother said, "It's time." We walked towards the door of the intensive care unit, and just as we got to the door, the young mother stopped. She took a deep breath as if to get herself centered. She looked on the door, and there on the door were the names of all the babies in the intensive care unit on a paper. She looked at the name of her son. She put her hand on that name, and she said, "I am his mother." She took the name off the door in her hand, and then we entered into the intensive care unit. We gathered around this tiny baby's bassinet, a baby struggling for life, being kept alive actually by artificial machines and other means. Had a time of prayer, reminded the family that this is a child of God. Whether he lives for 17 days or 100 years, he is a precious child of God. That even though his body will not carry him far, his soul, his spirit is alive and well and will live on in God's care, and they'll see him eventually when they enter eternity themselves. And then one of the nurses asked this young mother, "Would you like to hold him?" She said yes. They brought a rocking chair up and then unplugged the baby from all of these machines, wrapped him in a blanket, placed him in her arms. She sat there rocking back and forth, holding her baby as he breathed his last. What amazed me is she was so composed. Tears were running down her cheeks, but she started to sing to her baby as he died. Now the rest of us were coming unglued. The physician was weeping. She could hardly contain her grief. The nurses were hardly able to stay in that area. The parents and myself, we were almost unable to stay there because it was so difficult. But this young mother was composed as she sang to her baby and rocked him into eternity. After it was over, I began to ask myself, how could she do that? How could she be so composed at the time she lost her baby? And then I remembered. I remembered what she had done on the way into the room. Remember, she stopped and she said, "I am his mother." She defined who she was, and she knew what she needed to do. She knew that she needed to be with her son as a mother as he entered eternity. That young mother taught me a lot about how it is you need to know who you are before you face any challenge in life, and especially to know who you are before you face difficult times. Today I'd like to have you think about that question. Who am I? Who has God created me to be? And then to be that fully and completely in every situation of life that we face. Amen.